The storytelling is what I'm going to get into, but from the perspective of sound. So I'm going to talk a lot about feeling. The Night in the Woods was an inspiration to work on as a sound designer. The writers Scott Benson and Bethany Ockengray included a ton of sound into the script, and Alec Kaloka incorporated it into the music and programming as a cohesive whole. And he had some really cool implementation ideas, as well as writing all the music. Gordon McGladdy and Joey Van Elton of A Shell in the Pit also gave me a ton of support to explore with actual sound, but also with creative and moral support. Point being, the sound design in these ideas were a collaboration between all of us, and I'm not just sharing my ideas because they're all good. So this is a story about a place and a time. It's told through setting and atmosphere and characters, so that's what I'm going to talk about. My goal with the sound in this game was to bring you closer into the setting and to make you feel as though you are May, feeling as she would feel in this place. And so with the sound, there is a reason for everything. Every single one of the 5,090 sounds in this game makes a contribution to the story. Even with the footsteps, I was given the direction for May's Foley to sound as if she were an ungraceful potato sack. So try to listen as carefully as you can to these sounds and see how much you can learn about the story from them. This is the very first scene. It sets the mood right off the bat. So here's something silly playing on the TV, but it's also a piece of the story. It's there to convey a mood, and it contributes to the rule I made myself follow for all the sounds in this game, which is that everything has its own story that changes over time, and everything is alive. Being alive, in terms of sound, means chaos. It means if there is a repetitive action, like this conversation, there will be a corresponding set of variable sounds that trigger randomly. Being alive also means rhythm and movement in everything. It means that sound comes from both known and unknown sources. Mood is important. So how do you feel about being here? And why? I made each different ambience by taking the feelings that Scott's art gave me and giving them voice. Literally, I think human voice has a certain quality, and I think about it as if it gives that sense of life. So I used my own voice for a lot of the sound effects and ambiences. I made most of the wind sounds in the game by blowing into the microphone, like this, and I cut that into short segments that fade in and out, and then placed them as a scatter ambience, which is a sound that gets triggered at a random time interval as well as a random position between your left and right speakers, or in 3D space if you have that ability. I use this particular layer as an element in almost every outdoor scene to make it a signature sound where I was going for a lonely atmosphere. And I used signature or thematic sounds a lot to try to manipulate you subconsciously. But more on that later. And also, this is the implementation tool of choice, Fmod. The fireflies also change from fluttering to chirping when you jump into a swarm, like they're excited to be with you. So in the real world, we react to the things we hear as they happen. They give us memories, and we live with all of our senses. So having a character react to a sound at the same time you're experiencing it makes it feel as though all the elements belong together. Like this is a real world. the sound of one firefly is actually the sound of a bunch of frogs. So this ambience was one of the first ones that I made. I wanted to give May's home a comforting sense of life. So I decided that meant waking up and hearing your mom bustling around and humming. And later in the process, Alec pointed out that it didn't make a lot of sense, because when you go downstairs, your mom's actually just sitting there and reading. So, which was true, but instead of taking it out, I decided to create a little narrative each morning and have the mom finish up and sit down as you come down the stairs. So this is an example of a sound coming from an unknown source, also with the special purpose of letting you know that she's there to talk to if you want. So what is Angus up to? Grabbing the USB stick he has handy under a couple of pieces of paper on his desk. Off-screen sound can really help if you don't have enough time to animate everything, and it doesn't have to be something that was left out, it can be a choice. So this rummaging sound took a couple minutes to make. It was really easy, and you can plan for that. As a writer, you can write it in, and as a sound designer, you can look carefully for those moments where you can add continuing movement and fluidity and connect little narrative threads. And it doesn't have to be an obvious action either. Just like May's house, this location has its own story. And it tells us that Greg and Angus don't live in the nicest place, because I guess nice places have thicker walls. You can hear their neighbors, and it tells us they live among people who are watching a movie and living their own story outside of what the main characters are doing. We come back to the town every day, so it was important to enhance that sense of liveliness, that all the people and animals are doing their own thing. The telephone wires respond to us, and they sound higher in pitch at the end and lower in the middle, and they have a higher probability of rattling in the middle. Everything we can jump on responds to us, makes a different sound. And the squirrels react to the environment outside of what the player is doing, filling the soundscape with little footsteps on each different surface. I also made the car sounds using a highly advanced and unique process, which I will now demonstrate. So the main town ambience is filled with randomly triggering sounds. The train from earlier passes by every 90 to 300 seconds, and the townspeople that we can't see are calling out to another. We've got that wind from earlier and some birds chirping, most frequently between 1 and 3 seconds. Each different time interval was a deliberate choice that said something. And this is a detail I never thought anyone would ever know about, but here we are. The pigeons have a 44% chance of pecking a seed and a lower chance of breaking it open. So, adding probability helps make the world sound less repetitive. I did all this detail to help sell the idea again that you're waking up as May every day and moving through the ever-changing town. You really are living inside this space. If you decide to stand in one place for a while, you will hear more than a loop. The ambiences were designed to situate you in time, and in the spirit of the procedural visuals are always random. Each different atmosphere is another opportunity for immersion. Whether it's hissing pipes passing by, or a reverb that suggests a deep dark tunnel, or a chef that's humming along to the background music, which I needed. We took all the opportunities we could think of to blend sound effects and music together, like here. The rhythm of the train sound is at the same BPM as the music. And this sound effect actually made it onto the soundtrack, which is pretty exciting. So we often use real-time parameter control to determine how sounds change based on the game state or your actions. In this case, diegetic, which means that it exists for the characters in the story as a part of their world. And so here it sounds as if it's coming from the speakers in this location, and creating this effect is called FUTS. So if it interests you, I made that happen with a convolution reverb called fog convolver, and a little bit of EQ, and some delay. Diegetic music can be really helpful in creating moments and affecting mood. Here, May and her friend B are having an argument, and in the middle of the conversation, the record that was playing fades out, and we're left hearing the needle. It makes things serious and uncomfortable, and it's important to remember that sometimes silence is more powerful than music, and it can make music much more meaningful in contrast. So try to avoid carpet bombing your stories with music. Even if it's super good, choose your moments for both. Also remember that you can get creative with how you transition from one song to another. How would someone playing obnoxious guitar at a real party do it? Using voices came in pretty handy for background characters as well. These are not just animations, they're real live weirdos getting drunk in the woods. And I say weirdos because if you actually listen to what's going on, my primary use for adding so much voice to the ambience was to weird it up as much as possible. Greg Lebanon and Chris Tannick helped me with most of these, and we didn't give ourselves much direction, just went a little nuts and saw how much we could make each other laugh. For some of it, we even went into the woods to capture the space and probably seriously freaked some people out. So, be weird. It could be made into a 10-hour YouTube video. So, in the spirit of the game, we also all voice different genders because I think it's good to blur those lines. Another fun fact is that I can do a pretty good grandpa laugh. So be weird and always be imagining what could be happening inside each space. I imagine this loudspeaker lady being bored as heck, and maybe she's actually just sputtering nonsense. Okay, so no more fun. This is where things start getting dark in May's dreams. So once again, I breathed weirdly into the microphone. This time with as much creepy intention as possible. I made a palette of sounds to use in connection with these astral projections that May starts having. I made one sound especially for the dark being in the universe, and I won't say much about that, except that if you listen, you'll hear a deep, slow, pitched down breathing track. To get you more in May's head during scary scenes, or when you're sleeping, I also recorded some shallow breathing using binaural microphones, so it could sound like your own, which works better on headphones, but... I also used some of these sounds as scatters, so they behave like the winds that I was talking about before. And I did, in a few cases, add too much detail, and had to scale back for performance issue reasons. So, if I did it again, I would make the ambiences more condensed, but it was a learning process. So, my interpretation of this particular dream is that a tear is made in the universe that unleashes all the horrible sounds that continue to pop up after this, as if it breaks open May's head. And leaves a portal to this dimension, which is why I added those ambient layers to this big important moment, so you would make those associations. And this breathing that you're about to hear, the May breathing track, was actually an accident, where for some reason the track in the event itself didn't fade out with the rest of the sound between scene transitions. But sometimes accidents and the randomness of the system works, like I think it did in that case. I ended up liking that. So I took those signature sounds from the dreams and placed them at moments in the story, in the real world, that meant something, to emphasize a connection. I added the sound whenever a particular being is around and made it get louder the longer you stay there. I imagined again that it's coming from a functional part of the story. And it doesn't mean it's not noticed at all. I think that sound is an emotion, and it's an intangible feeling. And we notice the feelings it gives us, even if we can't pinpoint the source. So I don't find that discouraging, I find that powerful. And one of my least favorite expressions in the sound design industry is that if you've done a good job, people won't notice. I would argue that we shouldn't seek to go unnoticed, but instead provoke people into listening by making them feel shit. Sometimes your ideas might even break out of the subconscious realm and get placed directly into the story. I got the idea to try to affect you emotionally with a signature sound from inside. I was terrified by that horrible water demon in that game, and I realized that I could tell when it was near because they would play this ominous musical tone, which I first noticed when I approached a hatch where it had been placed as a spot ambience, and I felt fear building. I didn't want to open the hatch and confront the creature I knew would be there. I didn't want to jump into that water. I spent a long time just standing there, and it made a huge emotional impact. So whenever May is approaching something dark, which happens a few times, the volume of the horrible sound is increased the closer you get. I want to make you uneasy and reluctant to move forward. So when May starts out on the right in the scene, you can hear an active forest. There's movement in the bushes and birds, and as you progress, they all go silent, which was in the script. And then horrible sound starts coming in. Gave me the most direction. So this neat little presentation may have made it seem like I knew what I was doing all along, but I want to assure you that at the time, I certainly did not feel that way. And it was a learning process, and it wasn't as succinct as this, and I say this to encourage you not to worry about that in yourselves. I was able to do work that apparently people think is good because I loved what I was doing, and I loved this game, and I immersed myself in it, and didn't think about all the people who were going to play. I pushed away my awareness that this was my first full title release, and didn't let that make me too afraid to try all this stuff. I just did what I know. I got weird, and I experimented, and I followed my intuition along the lines of the beautiful story that Scott, Bethany, and Alec created. And on the topic of encouragement, I'll also mention that doing this was terrifying for me, but I made myself volunteer because I think that we who might be more anxious about this sort of thing, especially as few women in games and even fewer in game audio, need to start pushing away that fear of being seen and show each other that we're here and we're doing cool stuff. And that being here is so much fun, so if you want to get into this kind of career, you should, no matter who you are. And once you do, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. This was hard, but it's almost done now, and next time it will probably be easier. So lastly, I want to stress again how much of a team effort the sound was, especially with Alec. I can't really express how lucky I feel to have been able to work on a project like this with these people. So try to find people who inspire you to tell stories, and keep thinking of new ways to tell stories, and think about how sound can impact those stories. We have so much more exploring to do, and we're the best place to do it as indie game developers. Just don't do something normal, do something weird.